Our guest is a best-selling author with over 2 million books and courses sold, a leading behavioral change expert, a columnist for Oprah.com and Psychology Today, and a social media thought leader with 1.5 million fans worldwide, including some of my favorites like Tony Robbins, Deepak Chopra, Tim Ferriss, Jon Stewart, Arianna Huffington, and I can go on and on. She's known for pioneering self-help for people who wouldn't be caught dead doing self-help, transforming the genre with bestsellers like How to Be Happy, Damn It. Welcome to the Motivation Show, Karen Salmonson.
It's great to be here.
Well, you have quite a bio there, and you've had a whole bunch of best-selling books. Congratulations. And I've been fixated on your current book, which we'll get into in a moment or two. But let's begin for our listeners and define what exactly is a behavioral change expert.
Oh, well, I'm fascinated with the brain and why people do what they do or don't do what they do. And I help people to tweak their brains so they make wiser, more mindful choices that lead to a happier life.
Okay, that puts it
Sort
in.
of like brain upgrade. I give people like higher level software for their brains. That's what I do. I help them to use their brain at its full capacity because most people don't use, they're not as intentional about how they live their lives.
Yeah, that's very well said. I think, we often wake up and we're sort of in that status quo mode. And
Autopilot. Yeah,
yeah,
autopilot.
a little too often, right? Yeah, I like that
Yeah.
word autopilot. We go into autopilot, and that unfortunately robs us for the joy of a lot of new things, right? That we could
Yeah.
potentially be doing. So, I understand that you are spearheading something you call the Mortality Awareness Movement, showing how death awareness can be a powerful catalyst for living more fully. And you talk about when you become more death aware, you become a life enthusiast, which is
Yes.
very interesting. Almost, sounds like the opposite there, by thinking of death, you actually become even more enthusiastic. So we are all aware that we're gonna die. So what do you mean by a death awareness, and how will that actually bring us more joy?
Well, it's interesting because we started off talking about autopilot, and I help people to snap them out of, I think mortality awareness snaps you out of autopilot. I call it having a near death, near life experience. We talk about near death experiences. I didn't write the book because I had a near death experience. I had a near life experience, which is when you're on autopilot too much. A lot of people, I made up the term, but a lot of people relate to it once I say it out loud. They're like, oh, yeah. And a near life experience is, it happens when you're on your phone too much and you're like scrolling and swiping. So you're not actually fully in your life, you're kind of life adjacent. Or you can have a near life experience when you're out to dinner with a loved one, and instead of being fully present in the conversation, you're future projecting about like a worry or a fear, or you're kind of ruminating about a regret and you're not fully in the moment. And another form of a near life experience is when you keep saying someday, someday, later, all of those things. And so when you're aware that life is truly finite, then you start to be more present in your life because you're here and then you're not. And so it's up to you to make the here part as meaningful as possible. And that's what mortality awareness does. It gives you urgency, and urgency kind of inspires action to do all those things that you really want to do with your life.
That little device that we carry with us all the time is definitely an addiction. It's kind of like the casino slot machines where you got to be rewarded every few minutes to keep you on the machine, right? Because if they delay the reward, you're just going to get off the slot machine. So, the social media is very clever. They make sure that you keep seeing all the likes and all the comments, so they keeps you addicted. And so no matter how much we know that it's probably not a great thing for us, we still stay on those phones. So maybe we got some tricks of the trade here you can share that get off those darn things, once in a while and actually maybe smell the roses, as they say.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's what mortality awareness does. And I also feel like one of the dangers of being constantly connected to some screen somewhere is it doesn't free up our brains for contemplation and to know what we're really thinking underneath all the noise that's out there. And I think that contemplation is just as important as meditation, like where you know what you're thinking and you allow the thoughts to rise up versus meditation where you're trying to clear them. So it's about getting in touch with who you really are and what you want for your life. But what mortality awareness does, I do a lot of death mindfulness exercises and I know this is going to sound really weird, but some of them are even fun. So, and that's what snaps me out of it. Do you want me to share a few?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Who doesn't want to have fun, right?
Right, fun. So I wrote this book after my dad died, and it was a wake-up call that I needed to start. I was like in beast mode at that point. I was very much into my career, and on the outside, it looked, really thriving, but something was missing. And when he died, I started to really think about how short my life was, and it kind of like did a spring cleaning of my priorities. And I realized that I didn't want to be in beast mode. I wanted to be in best mode. I wanted balance and I wanted family, an idea that I kept swatting away. That was one of my some days. And when he died, I got sad because I thought my father would never know me as a mom because I didn't have kids then, never meet my kid, whoever that might be. And so I started to think about what I wanted for my life, and I wrote my own eulogy. So that's tool number one. And I help people to write their eulogies inside my book, but I make it fun by giving them a template to fill out, sort of like Mad Libs. Do you remember Mad Libs from
Yes.
when we were growing
Yep.
up? You just fill in the blanks, and so it doesn't feel like morbid. It takes the creepy crawlies out of it. And then I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert for you and your listeners that a lot of the blanks have to do with core values. Because if you want to live a life that you're really proud of, that when you get to your end of your life, you want to give it like a 10-star Yelp review, it's all about learning lessons that help you to grow into your best possible self. That's the end goal for your life. And that's a philosophy from Aristotle and Stoicism. Big fan of those things. They show up a lot in my books. And Aristotle says the reason why so many people are unhappy is they have the wrong end goal for their life. Instead of making it learn lessons to help you to become your best possible self, a lot of people's end goals for life are become the richest person on the planet, become the sexiest woman on the
Rich
planet.
and famous.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And those are about like ego and status and body pleasures. And Aristotle thought that it should be about your soul or your core self. He called it the education of your soul, which is fancy talk for saying like learn lessons to become your best possible self. And so what a eulogy does is it reminds you that your eulogy isn't going to be somebody getting up there and reading your LinkedIn profile. It's going to be about all those meaningful relationships you had, the meaningful experiences that you have. And so it reminds you to do that. And so another tool that I have, which is based on this, is every morning I don't just write a to-do list, I write a to-die list, which is not a bucket list. It's more like a to-do what matters most list. Because a to-do list is just about like worshiping productivity. But you could do everything on your to-do list, check off every box every day, and get to the end of your life and feel like you wasted your life. Because the goal of life is not to be productive, it's to live with love and connection and meaning and purpose and being of service, all those beautiful, juicy things. And those don't usually get on a to-do list. So you need a separate list that reminds you of those things. And that's what a to-die list is. And so I write those every morning too.
Well, I'll tell you, Karen, my observations when I observe people is they are chasing their tail. because they're focused on what they think is going to get them approval from others, which is success, or their definition of success, which is accumulate a lot of money, have a lot of toys, have the biggest house, have a big car. That's why they're on social media, trying to keep up with the Joneses, see what everybody else is doing, envying them, and then at the end of the day, crashing because they're sad that they can't have the things, that other people have, because you can't have everything that everybody else has. Everybody's got something that maybe you don't have, and you have something maybe they don't have. So we are focused on, unfortunately, the things that at the end of the day we thought were going to bring us joy. We think that if we toil for 40 years, break our back, we're going to get these raises and we're going to get these promotions, and that's going to be all happy. And then one day we say, is that all there is?
Exactly.
Or we get fired or the company closes, and then what?
Yeah, that's a wake-up call too. Absolutely. So actually, in my book, I talk about the top regrets of the dying. I interviewed a bunch of different end-of-life doulas, and a lot of them shared the same regrets. And one of the big ones was, I wish I didn't work so hard,
Mm.
which is how I felt when my dad died. I'm like, I'm working too hard. I need balance, not the beast mode, but the best mode. And so I looked at all of the different regrets of the dying and I wrote them up. I have 6 of them in the book. And then I reverse engineered them. And I thought, what do I need to do now to make sure I'm like spraying myself with regret-proof sealants that my life, I'm not going to end up with these regrets. And I came up with a system that actually has to do with embracing 7 core values that if you embrace and intentionally think about these go on your to-do list like regularly, then you can live with greater joy and less regrets. And I can share some of those core values if you want.
Absolutely. Let's go into them.
Okay, all right, we'll go into it. So the first one, they actually go in alphabetical order. I found a way to make them work in alphabetical order, except for one I had to tweak a little, which you'll see how I tweaked it so it stayed in my alphabet. The first one is A for authentic, and you have to really embrace being your true self, or what I call being you-ier. Like the you-ier you are, the happier you will be, is one of my philosophies. And so, because at the end of people's lives, a lot of people wished that they had followed their own hearts, not their mothers or societies, that they had done what they really wanted to do with
And
their.
if I can just ask you, how do people be their authentic self without, maybe thinking that they're offending other people? Because, people don't want to have that kind of tension in their lives. And they think, oh, it's better, maybe I'm a little bit quiet. Maybe I won't, say what I really think about this subject, to keep the peace. Tell us about that.
I have a lot to say about that. And actually, it has to do with the next core value. There's a lot of answers how I can answer you, but one quick one that comes to mind is my second core value is B for brave, and you have to be brave. But my longer-winded answer, which I'll still try to keep it somewhat short, is because I'm a behavioral change expert, that's my background. I came up with this device that I have people use, which is backed in research, and it's called identity-based habits. Okay, so I'm going to explain what it is. Frank Sinatra sang Doobie Doobie Doo, and he was a great singer, but he was a backwards thinking behavioral change expert because we should all be singing be do, not do be, because who we think we are determines what we do. Our identity is the puppet master of our habits. And there's a lot of studies about this, but your listeners and you might even relate because we're doing it without knowing we're doing it. If you walk around thinking, I am sloppy, you will do the habits of a sloppy person. If you think, I am organized, you'll be organized. If you think, I am a healthy person, you'll eat healthy. If you think I eat like junk food, you're going to eat junk food. So you have to change your identity to change your habits. So what I have people do is create identity-based statements on their top core values. So some of the core values that I recommend, the 7 that help to reverse engineer your way away from having the common regrets of the dying. I take those core values And I help people to create uh, identity-based statements using this kind of verbal template. I am, and so I do. And when you connect the core value to your habit, you're more likely to do it. So I'll give you a couple examples, but first I'll tell you one study that reports this, although there's lots of studies. It's a thing. Identity-based statements is a thing. But there was one study where they were trying to get more people to show up at the polls to vote. So they took two groups of people, and one they gave like adorable taglines and, kind of like advertising marketing things to try to encourage them to vote. And the other one, they worked on their identities to get the people to think of themselves as a voter. Oh, I'm a voter. I'm a voter. And the people that they worked on the identity with were 3 times more likely to show up at the polls than the people where they just used fancy taglines and stuff. And so when you attach your identity, what it does is it creates a kind of cognitive dissonance if you don't do it. So here's an example. One of my top core values is being loving. So my friend Danielle was having a birthday party, and she lives in Connecticut, and I live in New York. And I'm like a cartoon character of a New Yorker where I don't drive anymore. My driver's license expired, and I let it expire because I walk everywhere or I take a taxi. And so when I wanted to go to Danielle's birthday party, my first thought was, oh, I don't know how to get there. I don't drive anymore, getting to Connecticut. And then I know that my top core value is loving and meaningful relationships really matter to me. That's my eulogy. I think about that all the time. I really believe it. So I wrote down, I'm a loving person. And so, I mean, this is silly, but it worked. Silly sometimes works. I am a loving person. And so I find a way to get my tush to Connecticut for Danielle's birthday party. And then I did because I knew if I didn't, there's a cognitive dissonance, but I am a loving person. So as soon as you attach a core value to something, then you're more likely to do it. And I could
That's
give you
powerful.
more. Yeah, but that's just a simple upfront example for you.
Yeah, no, that makes all the sense in the world. So I don't think we got into the actual name of your book. So let's talk about it right now. You're to
Yeah.
die for life. I love that subtitle there, How to Maximize Joy and Minimize Regret Before Your Time Runs Out. Love that. So in your book, you talk about, again, not having your life diluted, not having it watered down, which is pretty powerful. And you talk about you're showing up, but half the time you could be replaced by a cardboard cutout. Wow, that's some statement there. And no one would even notice. Um, and you use a fear of the end as a fuel for the now. I love that. Tell us about that.
Well, in some ways, I think that death is the universe's kind of feisty, sassy way to get us to actually do something with our lives. Because if we lived forever, we'd be like, oh, I'll write my novel in a couple centuries from now. Oh, I'll tell him I love him in the next millennium. We put things off, we procrastinate anything. And death is the ultimate deadline. Just like when you know you have a deadline for a project, you're more likely to do it. So when you're reminded that life is finite, it puts a fire under you to do what you got to do. And it also changes what you fear. Like if you think to yourself, oh, I'm afraid to make that phone call to whatever it is, to be interviewed at that company. But then you think of your eulogy again or how you want to live your life. And, you become more afraid to get to the end of your life and realize that you didn't do those things. That, I feel like I remind people also about thinking about what they want their life, the message of their life, what they want their life to be about, the legacy that they want to leave behind. And not just some big grand legacy. You can leave what I call ripples, little ripples of like how people remember you, the stories they have of you. And those also have to do with core values. Oh, I remember how she inspired me. She helped me, being of service to people, being generous, being loving. Loving is a big one. And having meaningful relationships that are with active listening and really caring, all of these things. Again, those blanks in your eulogy have to do with core values and living as a person with high integrity as your best possible self.
So Karen, there's a lot of people who come to me and they say, I took this course or I listened to this interview and I was really pumped up. I was excited. I was ready to conquer the world. And the next day comes and same
Uh,
routine all over again. Um, they thought about death. They've thought about why that should be inspiring, but they still can't get out of their own way. They still have that book in them. You've wrote a bunch of them, but they can't seem to get the pages going and they fall back into their same patterns. They don't even realize, and you talk about it in your book, that there are, they come up with the excuses that I don't have enough time, which is a
yeah.
biggie. I love that you talk about that in your book. And you talk about that we do have the time. We just got to replace the things that we're wasting it with that we don't even necessarily know we're wasting the time with again, if you have those ultimate goals of no regret life, then you're gonna replace one bad habit for a good habit. But some people are just stuck. How do we talk to those people that are just the hardcore cases?
Oh yeah. I have a lot in my book to help them. And I do write with humor and I do try to make things fun, especially if I'm talking about death with people.
Yeah.
I want to make it, something that it's actually enjoyable to read about, which that's where I bring in the humor. But I have a couple of things. First of all, I have a life audit in there to help people get rid of their crap and clutter in their life because the excuse, I didn't have enough time, is sort of like the adult version of the dog ate my homework. So I help people figure out where they're wasting time and energy. But I'm going to bring up a tool that I wrote about this on my Substack column and people really loved it. So I'm going to share it here. It's in the book too. I have what I call my marble mortality jar. Okay. So let me tell you what this is. I started this a year or so ago. And it starts off sounding a little scary, but stay with me because it's really powerful. I counted up how many months I have left to live if I live to 100.
Mm.
I picked 100 because I'm optimistic. My mom is a feisty 93-year-old, and my son asked me to live to 200, but I bargained. So I figured it out, and I had something like 473 months left to live, and then I bought 473 marbles. I got
Excellent.
500 marbles. I actually had to
Yeah.
order 500 in bulk from Amazon, and when it came, the most depressing thing was like I'm not even using all of these 500. And it really made me aware that my life is like, there's like only, it's finite. I had to automatically remove to get down to 473. And then I put them in jars. I bought these tall, I got two jars. One, which were my future months, and one, which would be the months that I would take out a marble each month and put it in that's my past. And so the first month came. And it was like I was doing it as an experiment. So the first month, I wasn't really prepared to know what it would feel like. And I pulled out the first marble and I looked at it and I thought, this is a piece of my life. How did I spend this piece of my life? And I thought about what did I do this month? And I had trouble even thinking. I was like, I think I had a dental surgery. I went, what did I? And it was all a blur. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to be more intentional next month. And I plunked the marble into the jar. And then I picked out a marble for the next month. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make this month memorable, a month that's worth a piece of my life like that. And I started to think about what do I want to do this month and really plan it again with intention, not an autopilot. and get excited about things and showing up. Oh, I'm going to visit my mom. Oh, I'm going to, spend more time with this friend, or I'm going to, go see that musical, thinking about things like that. And so when the next month came along and I took out that marble, I remembered exciting things I did that month, and I wrote it down and I journaled about it. And I have the two jars in my kitchen. And every time I go into the kitchen, I see the jars there, and they're beautiful. They're not morbid. They're like gorgeous colored marbles. And it keeps me, it's like my accountability buddy. And actually has a secondary benefit. It gets me eating better because I told myself I'm going to live to 100, and they're in the kitchen. And I'm like, should I get more ice cream? And then I look at the jars. I'm like, shish, I want to live to 100. You know, no more ice cream, So it has a secondary benefit like that. But it keeps me aware of how I'm living my life and making sure I'm living in a way that I'm going to be proud of when the time comes.
That reminds me, I believe it was Billy Crystal who wrote 700 Sundays and was in the Broadway play, the 700 Sundays that he got to live with his father. He actually counted them,
Oh,
so I thought that was rather fascinating. And then there was a book called Tuesdays with Maury, how Mitch Albom spent, every Tuesday with this gentleman by the name of Maury. And, we all know, unfortunately in life, there's only so many Tuesdays and there's only so many Sundays to spend. So that definitely I can see that as a motivator. So in your book, you did, and you alluded to the fact that you wrote your own eulogy. Tell us what's in your eulogy.
well, I really thought about the people in my life because I really am a big believer that a life that's to die for a life is about meaningful relationships. So it made me aware that I wanted to have like more adventures with them, make time for those vacations. Um, and then also, whatever challenges I was at, I wanted to write about them already thinking that, we remember how Karen got through that challenge, So like I will make this a story of like a hero's journey story. And it got me thinking that way. I wrote down some of the things I was dealing with, that current me was dealing with, that aspirational eulogy me could make sure that she makes current me like resolve everything. And that's how I sometimes think, like, what are the bridge habits I need to get from current me to aspirational eulogy me? And I think about that. Who do I need to become to get everything that I want in my life? Is a question that I ask myself and journal about. And the answer is usually a core value that I attach to a habit. And then that's my identity-based statement that I use to motivate myself to get to become aspirational eulogy me.
Talk about different types in your book of people. One is called the liberator, where the fear of failure begins to lose its sting. You talk about when you understand that your time is limited, the risk of not trying at all becomes far scarier than the possibility of failure. And that's a biggie because, a lot of us, we just quit. We just never start, or we start, we get that knocked on the canvas and we stay down on the canvas. We get frustrated for a million reasons, why try? Yet the reality is that, not even making an attempt is something studies have shown you'll regret more than actually trying something and even failing. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Well, that's the second letter in my favorite core values is B is for brave. And a lot of, regrets for people at the end of their life is that they wish that they had taken more chances and done things that were, more adventurous and stuff like that. So I help my clients create identity-based statements around B is for brave. And you want to be that. Sometimes I feel people choose, which isn't in my A through G core value, but strong. I've had some clients value that word. So I have people pick the core values that they resonate with. Because I remember particularly one of my clients was like, I am strong and so I. And that word resonated with him. And he was more likely to take chances if he thought about that. But if a core value is one where there's already a little disconnect where you're like, well, I don't feel strong or I don't feel brave, then I have people kind of, you know, think about times where they showed some bravery to remind themselves that, yes, you are, or say this sentence, the old me used to not be brave, but the new me is brave. And start to think of yourself that way, that you can become that. And then write it when you write it again in your eulogy and you think about it and you read it. I mean, people have mission statements for their businesses. You should have a mission statement for your life. And you read it and you start to read it over and over. You have a clearer path. Like Yogi Berra, who was like a funny guy. He was like, if you don't know where you're going, then it's a good chance you're not going to get there. So you have to know where you're going with your life and write it down and really think about it and get that into your mind so it's more intentional.
Well, one of the chapters in your book, "You're to Die for a Life," is kind of fascinating. And it says that talks about the midday integrity slump, the number one enemy of a fulfilling life. So, what exactly is a integrity slump, and how do we not have this enemy? Because nobody wants their number one enemy.
Well, what I think is a lot of people are, as we spoke about in the very beginning, on autopilot. They're like impulse. They do things by impulse. And so, what I think people need to do is to have what I call speed bumps. So they're choosing from a place of mindfulness. And we start off our day a lot with such like intention that this is going to be the day that I accomplish everything. But life is like the movie Indiana Jones, where it's like suddenly you get through the quicksand and then it throws a tarantula at you, and then you get through that. So you're always going to be bombarded with obstacles. So in these moments, I have people stop, and I have a bunch of tools, but I'm picking one. So I have people stop and think about the greater than sign, which is from math from when we were kids, where it has like, it looks like a little sideways triangle, and the little point is less than, and the bigger part is greater than. And so in that moment, you think, which is more important to me? So let's say even if it's about going to the gym or going for that walk, but then you're like, I'm going to watch Netflix, or I'm going to like, which is more important to me? Being healthy or watching a show I'm going to forget about like in a day? Which is more important? So to keep asking yourself that. And in my book, You're to Die for Life, I talk a lot about something else that Aristotle believed. And he believed that the reason why a lot of people were unhappy is that they confuse pleasure for happiness. And pleasure is hedonia, as he calls it. And that's like hit and run joy. It's impulse. It's
Mm.
sort of enjoy now, struggle more later, which is like eat the entire pint of ice cream, struggle more later. And the other thing, happiness, true happiness, is called eudaimonia, which is also, we sometimes call it fulfillment. And that's more the struggle a little now, but enjoy
Get
more
the
later.
taxes done now.
Yes, exactly. Or go to the gym. It's hard,
Yeah.
but then
Yeah.
enjoy more
That one
later.
hour that you devote, makes you feel good for the rest of the day. So, that short-term sacrifice for the long-term gain. Yep. That's
And when you
powerful.
And when you put those speed bumps in and you ask yourself, is this habit going to move me forward to my Year to Die for Life, or backward away from it? Or which is more important to me? And so we need to create these speed bumps to snap us out of near life experience, autopilot. And so I'm a big fan of speed bumps. I have a bunch of little speed bump tricks that I put in the book.
Well, that's exciting. So let's go right to the end of your book, your last chapter, which is a biggie, and it talks about the purpose of life is to find and do the purpose of your life. But a lot of us struggle with understanding the purpose of our life because life moves very fast. We're on autopilot. We do what, we get a job that just we feel is either makes us a lot of money or gives us a nice pension or whatever it does. But we're not really doing the thing that really gets us excited. We're just making a living. Um, And so how do we actually find a purpose of a life? Because some of us are into 60s, 70s, or even 80s, and they still don't know what they're doing with their life. They're living, but they're not doing the purpose of their life.
Yes, exactly. And that goes back to my first core value, which was being authentic. And so in your To Die for Life, I talk a lot about trying to understand your core self. And some people think of it as soul, some people call it core self. I'm sort of open to calling it whatever you want to call it, but you have to become you-ier is kind of my quick phrase for it. And that requires, I have a lot of questions, prompts to help people figure that out. But a lot of people's legacies has to do not only with knowing themselves, but turning your pain into purpose. If you've had some sort of struggle, that you can turn it into something that you can help others with, feeling like you're of service. And that's come up a lot for people on their deathbeds, feeling like they had wished they had given more, had been more of service. So to be very intentional about that. And also looking at the things that you do where you're in your flow state, that those are the things that you should spend more time doing. And then motivating yourself through some of the tools that I have in my book to actually live that way. So you're doing these things. So you're putting your was here flag on the planet. You're really giving truly of yourself. And I shared about this in a different chapter that was about my dad's passing. Do I have time to share about that?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Um, well, my dad's death really was my wake up call and really a big reason for writing this book. And on the day he died, something very weird happened, which is my mom came to the hospital. I was there first, and she came to the hospital. We didn't know it was going to be his last day, and she said, "Karen, look what I found in Dad's one of his bureaus. It's a letter that you wrote to him when you were in college." And I was like, what? And yeah, he saved it. So, I mean, first of all, I found that very touching that he saved something from when I was in college, but I couldn't even remember what I'd sent him. And so I opened it up and I had torn some pages from a book. And it wasn't on there what book it was. So I still don't even know what book. But, and I read it and it was so synchronicitous because it was sort of something that would help me to make peace with his death and also inform me for how I wanted to live my life and help me to embrace my own death. And I'll tell you what it is because I slightly memorized it, but not completely memorized it because over the years I lost the exact pages. But I read it at his eulogy, so I still remember. And it started off, and I did not write this, and it started off and it said, "Everything that is not given is lost." And then it paused in the pages and it said, "This is a potent wake up call. Read those words again. Everything that is not given is lost. Every thought, every feeling, every talent, every passion, every skill, every dream, every hope is lost unless you share it with others. And then what you give to others, they then pass on to others, who then pass it on to others, who then pass it on to others. And that the metaphor of a pebble in the pond is thereby right to mention here. And viewed this way, what kind of pebble do you want to be? What kind of ripples do you want to leave behind? And so these ripples are another form of legacy and how people remember you and what you will share. Like, your story of inspiration, if you got through something, or a kindness that you did, or my dad was a contrarian in how he did things. He was a financial investor, but he thought outside of the box. And later on, I realized that even though I'm not in a financial job, I had inherited from him being a contrarian when it comes to thinking and creativity, always wanting to be a little bit innovative and outside of the box. That was one of his ripples to me. And always seeing him being kind to people, that was a ripple to me. So we are leaving ripples with others in how we live our lives, and to be intentional and mindful about how we want to show up and think about the ripples we want to leave behind is a good way to live.
Well, I would add one more thing to that, Karen. I would add that to do much of this without an overriding agenda, because a lot of us will only do kind things
Oh,
only when we have an agenda. And usually that agenda is called money. But wouldn't it be nice if we just did things just from the
yeah.
kindness of our hearts? We opened the door for the elderly person, who's struggling to get through the door, or we help the blind man across the street, and there's no, overriding agenda other than the fact that we're just doing God's work. So,
I agree with that. And you know what's interesting about how our brains are wired? That when you do, there's a do good, feel good effect, and it's called helper's high or do good, feel good.
mm.
That there's actually studies that the more kind you are to others, our brains are wired that we'll be happier. In fact, doing actions you're proud of is one of the best ways to get yourself back
So
into
we
your
don't
good.
even need the agenda because it's coming to the reward's coming to us anyway, right? Isn't that the paradox?
Interesting. Isn't that interesting that we're
Yeah.
wired that way? It's so interesting.
That's fascinating. So I got to tell you, I read a lot of books. Yours book is a page turner. It's hard to put down. Every chapter is really fascinating. I'm not just saying this to apple polish you. It's a tremendous book. It's really a guide to really being happier and just living your most fulfilled life. And that's quite incredible. And you do it in a different way than all the other self-help so-called books, because you talk about, looking at the end of your life, because you can fool yourself, but we're all going to meet that same fate at the end of the day. So you might as well be happy and fulfilled today, because we're not guaranteed that tomorrow. So thank you for that great life lesson. How can people stay in touch with you, learn more about you, and hear about all the great things that you're doing?
Well, thank you. And this was a fun interview. I enjoyed chatting with you here. Well, my book is called You're to Die for Life, and it's available everywhere books are sold, But I also have a website called you're to die for life.com, where I also have freebies there if people want that and coaching and all of that kind of stuff. But then my name is Salmonson. Everybody mangles it and they say Salmonson. I'm always saying, not salmon, not salmon. So my social media is not salmon. So you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Substack, pretty much everywhere under not salmon.
Okay, great sense of humor there, Karen. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.